Pull up a chair and tell me a memory. Why does it matter to you? I want to hear your story, your point of view. Tell me what happened to you.
Hi, and welcome back to Tell Me What Happened, the podcast that features folks from all walks of life telling us one true childhood story and how that event, that experience, has impacted who they are as an adult. Today I have as my guest Rabbi Allen Secher. I've known the rabbi for probably 20 years or so, but he's been a minister for a lot longer than that. Rabbi was ordained in 1962. He served pulpits in New York, Mexico City, Los Angeles, and Chicago, as well as in Montana. The rabbi has worked for social justice his whole life. He is the last survivor of 16 rabbis who were arrested in 1964 in St. Augustine. Welcome to the show, Rabbi Allen Secher.
Thank you, Jay. That was my mother wrote that intro, right?
Well, Rabbi, I've known you for probably 20 some years due to our relationship at the family school at Old St. Pat's. But your experience as a rabbi, as a social justice advocate, goes back a lot longer than that. I'm ready and happy to hear your story, although I know a little bit about it and I think it's somewhat sad. But are you ready to tell your childhood story?
Oh boy, am I. Let's do it. Let me set the scene first, because the place is critical to the action itself. I was raised in Butler, Pennsylvania, nowadays very famous for the attempted assassination of the president. Butler, Pennsylvania was a very tough, anti-Semitic town. It was a lot of steelworkers and farmers. My parents loved the town. I hated it. I couldn't wait to get out of the town. I faced anti-Semitism in that town for as long as I can remember. When I was a little kid, 4 years old, 5 years old, I was getting brickbats thrown at me, stuff thrown at me with Jew bastard on the other side of the rock. And many a time I had to run home with a busted open head. An incident way back then, I was 10 years old, did not take place in Butler. It took place in Meadville, Pennsylvania, a similar town to Butler. My parents and I summered at Conneaut Lake, Pennsylvania, a resort area up north. Butler's in almost to the Ohio border. And we summered every summer. And one day during that time, at 10 years old, I got up in the morning and had terrible pains in my gut, but terrible. And my father was back in Butler, but my mother was there, and we jumped in the car and raced to the nearest hospital, Meadville, Pennsylvania. We pulled into St. Joe's Hospital or St. Andrew's Hospital, it doesn't matter, but a Catholic hospital. And what I was told was there was no doctor at the hospital, no doctor who could treat me. You'll have to go to the public hospital down the street. It was clear to the two of us at that time that they were saying, we don't treat Jews. That was a heavy, heavy experience. All right, now let's fast forward to high school. Until my senior year, I was the only Jew in my class, period. I was it. In the town, there were different groups of people. There were the farmers' kids. There were the steelworkers' kids. There were the townies' kids. And I certainly was a townie kid, but not complete. For the guys in the town, that was all right. I don't think they even bothered with my being Jewish. But the females were a whole different story. I dated a lovely for a while until one day she came to me and said she couldn't date me anymore. Why not? Well, I can't date you because Jews are drunks. Why are Jews drunks? Because they drink wine on Friday night. And obviously, if they drink wine on Friday night, they're drinking all the other nights. I didn't know enough to tell her about Jesus and the wine and the fishes and so on, but she couldn't date me. And that was the case. It was rare that I could have a local date. They were told that they were not permitted to date me, except in my senior year. One lovely lady said, I'm not going along with that. There was a fancy dance for the Rainbow Girls, which was a Masonic girl. There was a fancy formal dance every year to which I was never invited. Senior year, she said, to hell with that. You're my date. All right. All that is background. Now let me tell you the incident. That was to lead to the incident. I was not an athlete as a kid. Oh, I played around with athletes and played a little bit of basketball and had a travel team that I managed and ran, but I was not an athlete. But I decided I could be an athlete. I didn't play football. I tried out and was lousy. Didn't play football, didn't play basketball for the high school team, didn't do swimming. But the one thing that the high school did that I knew I could manage was the golf team. It was a 5-man golf team. As a kid, I was a pretty good golfer, certainly not as good as the kid golfers today, but I was a good golfer in the low 80s and maybe on occasion in the 70s, but I was a good golfer. Sophomore year, I was number 6 on a 5-man team, which made me first alternate. But I never got to play. The doggone guys were good and good. And I never got to play. I think I traveled to one meet, but I never got to play. Between sophomore and junior year, I improved my golf enormously. My father was in the wholesale food business, and we lived upstairs from his warehouse. I established a net in the warehouse, and I would come down almost nightly to practice. And I got better. It's now junior year, and there's an announcement in the school announcing that said, candidates for the golf team, please show up at the coach's office to arrange for physicals. The coach was a woman. She was the chemistry teacher. And I was the first guy at her door. And she answers the door, and conversation went almost exactly like this. Oh, Alan, I've been meaning to tell you, we can only have 5 players this year. But Miss Critchlow, you know and I know that I'm due to be at least number 3, and maybe I could challenge to be number 2. No, Alan, we're only allowed 5 players this year. But Miss Critchlow, I can be one of those players. No, Alan, we're only allowed 5 players. I'm sorry about that. Well, the light turns on in my head that Miss Critchlow was trying to say to me, the members of the country club have told me no Jews allowed. The country club was restricted. And I was devastated. This was my chance to become a high school hero. I never made it. Okay. Unfortunately, we didn't appeal to the school board, but the experience was indelible. just absolutely indelible. And it controlled my life. It still controls my life, where I can tell this story without taking a beat, because I I don't say I repeat it every morning while lying in bed, but I know the experience, and I know it well. And I guess that pushed me in those days to say, this is unacceptable, that somebody should be treated third class, fourth class. And so from then on in, that peppered my experience in civil rights, so that it has meant the rest of my life seeing to it that nobody has to face what I did as a kid. To me, as a kid, that was horrible. I'll tell you, because this podcast is not determined by the FCC, a small bit that I did. My 60th birthday, I decided I want to go back to Butler. I was living at that point here in Chicago. And I decided I want to go back to Butler and experience the barber and the grade school and the YMCA, the places that I hung out at. And so I decided there was something important for me to do. So I drove out to the country club, which was about 5 or 6 miles outside of town. But I drove out to the country club, and the country club at this point, by the way, was integrated. They needed Jewish money, but the country club was integrated. I walked onto the golf course, and I pissed on the 18th green. It was just my way of expression to the wonderful people that had denied me that, some like 45 years earlier. For the rest of my life since that experience in high school has been fighting pretty hard to see to it nobody has that experience again. Now, it's not the case. It's not the case. It's not the case. Look at anti-Semitism today and the experience of it all. Look at anti-racist or racist experience today. It's not the case. But if I can just be a little bit of help, I'm 91 years old, but I'm still at it. At least my head's in good shape, even if my body's good and old. So, Jay, I think that's the experience. I don't know how long that took.
Well said. And I'm sorry that you went through all that. The country club was the place that your team must have been practicing or played their games. Is that right? That's my one
Both.
clarification.
Both.
Okay.
They practice at the country club, and their matches were half the time, like any other athlete, half the time at the country club.
Well, you've sort of already answered the question I was going to ask you, which is how that experience has impacted your life, because I think subsequently you've already said that you sort of dedicated your life to fighting anti-Semitism and the larger issues of exclusion that involves race and other elements of human society. You want to add anything to that, how it's
Well,
impacted your life now?
I'm thinking as you're talking to me of a small example. Okay.
Okay.
I was jailed along with 15 other rabbis. I was jailed with 15 other rabbis and a layman at a demonstration in June of 1964 in St. Augustine, Florida.
Okay.
We came at the request of Martin Luther King. By the way, I was jailed twice. I was jailed in Albany, Georgia in 1962 and jailed in 64 in St. Augustine, Florida. And what was the impetus? The impetus was that the blacks of the community were third grade. And as an example, the blacks were not permitted to use sections of the beach in St. Augustine, just not permitted. And after this experience, when we went back for the 50th anniversary which was in 2014. And at that point, there were only 6 members of that team still alive. When we went back, I went to the beach. I wanted to see what had happened. And there was a black fellow with his daughter sitting on the beach. And I walked up to him and I said, "Do you know how it happens that you're here?" And he had no idea. So I spent a few minutes with him telling him. But to see to it that that fellow had access to everything was absolutely the same thing as my having access to the high school golf team.
Amen.
Same story.
Yes.
He was just black. The Jewish community in St. Augustine is different. They're I guess I can't say semi-integrated. They're more or less integrated. Okay, but here's this fellow, and the experience in St. Augustine was so memorable that, can I tell a little bit of this story? Does it fit?
Well, we got about 3 minutes, so if you could
Oh,
do it.
all right. The experience in St. Augustine, Florida, was responsible for President Johnson pushing the 1964 Civil Rights Act. He was so moved by what had happened with us that he pushed it, and a short time after we were there, the Civil Rights Act. I'm really proud that I had a little touch of history to be proud of.
We've done a lot, Alan. I know that. And, we're not going to be able to get into the interfaith discussion today, which is where I met you at the old St. Pat's. We don't have time for that. But I do want to thank you as a fellow human being, as someone that you have also ministered to. Thank you for your leadership in terms of social justice. I think that it's really, really important that there are men and women and people who stick their necks out and say this isn't right. And I'm glad you were one of those people back in the 60s and 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, all the way up to today. And you keep doing it. So I appreciate that. And the world does too, even if we don't say it enough. So thank you for coming on the show, Rabbi Allen Secher.
I loved it, Jay. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, that's our show.
We did it.
We did it. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, I told you I couldn't say my name in less than 20 minutes.
I'd like to thank our sponsors, Sidelining Publishing, publishers of quality books, and the newest 10 by 10 black hole chess. If you're interested in playing chess in a new way, check out blackholechess.com, because E4 does not work as an opening move in that game. So until next time, this is Jay Rehack asking you all to please stay safe out there and try not to hurt anybody.